In this chapter, we want to take a deeper look into what inventory is and how to account for it. Remember, inventory consists of three pieces. We have our raw materials, our work in process, and our finished goods. Our inventory will sit in each of these accounts. So these are all asset accounts. And just kind of go through and define what goes into each of those accounts. So you'll have record of that. And as a review, we need to make sure we understand the FOB shipping point, FOB destination that we talked about previously, and what happens to that inventory, especially when it comes to who owns it at what point. So if it is FOB shipping point and those goods are in transit, the ownership belongs to the buyer. Where if it's FOB destination, ownership belongs to the seller. And we talk about goods on consignment. These are goods that you ask somebody else to sell for you. No matter where those goods are sitting, the consigned goods do not transfer ownership. So whoever goods those are, no matter what location, that's who's going to account for that inventory. We have 4 methods we're going to talk about when we look at how to account for our inventory. Specific identification says, I know specifically which items I sold, and those are the ones that I will account for. First in, first out. Whatever I sell first is going to be the first to go, or whatever I bring in first is going to be the first to sell. Last in, first out. Whatever I bring in last is going to be the first to sell. And then the average cost, where we just take an average cost of everything. Again, as a review, we should look at that cost of goods sold formula. We'll be using this a lot. And what this is, again, is your beginning inventory plus your purchases minus your ending inventory gives you that cost of goods sold. When we talk about our weighted unit cost, our weighted average unit cost, what we're looking at is what our total value is of our goods available for sale divided by the total units of the goods available for sale. Again, this is all what's available. And that's going to give us an average cost. And we'll show you how that comes into play. So again, review these 4 methods. Make sure you kind of understand the flow of the inventory in each method. But I'm going to walk you through an example of each of these. This is one of those concepts that's a little easier to do than to talk about. So I'm hoping by going through this, you'll understand it a little bit more. So one thing when we get a problem like this, some things we want to point out, they're giving us the ending inventory. They're telling us what's left in our ending inventory. This is only good for specific identification. Otherwise, we don't care. We follow the flow. So one thing you should always do as soon as you get one of these problems is to figure out what units go in to each of these categories. I want to know what's available for sale, what's in my ending inventory, and what's in my cost of goods sold. And I want to know this by units because the units do not change. Based on the inventory method we use, the value will change, but the units will never change. So we want to make sure we always go back to those units for consistency. So here, I'm going to look at what I have available for sale. Again, I have my beginning inventory and everything I purchased. That's my goods available for sale. If I add those three up, it should come to 800. That's the 300 plus the 350 plus the 150. Then it tells me what my ending inventory is, which means that my cost of goods sold in units must be 550 units. I'm going to keep coming back to this. So it's a good thing to make sure you have all of those numbers to start with so that you have some check figures to go back to. So let's show you how to do this. I think it's easiest to explain if we give you these little charts to follow. Again, not the only way to do it. I'm just going to teach you one way because I don't want to get you confused. If you find something that's easier for you to understand, then go with it. Again, you can always ask me for clarification on any method that you come up with. I just think that this is the easiest for explaining and to make sure you have everything together. So first thing you want to do in each of these problems is look at what I have available for sale. So I'm going to put in all my dates of my purchases and how many units I have. And how much each of those were purchased at. I want to check the number of units to make sure I have everything accounted for. It should come up to 800. It does. And then I'm going to figure out the value of this. So if and I'll try to write small here. If I take 300 times 4, that's 1200. I take 350 times 5, that's 1750. And 150 times 6 is 900, giving me a total value of 3850. Again, important to know these numbers and to start off with that. Now, specific identification is a little bit different because they tell us exactly what is left in our ending inventory. And remember, if I know what's available, I can subtract off my ending inventory and get my cost of goods sold. So they tell me, let me scroll up here a little bit, that in my ending inventory, I have 100 units left of my 315 purchase. Those all cost $5. They also tell me I have 100 units left from my 329 purchase. Those cost me $6. And they tell me I have 50 left from my beginning inventory. That was $4. Again, I want to check my units to make sure I accounted for everything. They come to 250, so that's what they should. Which means now I have to figure out by taking my purchases, subtracting my ending inventory to get my cost of goods sold. Which means I must have sold 250 units of my beginning inventory. I also must have sold 250 units of that 315 purchase. Those cost $5. And I must have sold 50 of that 329 purchase. Again, just looking at units to make sure I'm on the right track. Before I start doing all that math, let's make sure we have everything accounted for. Now we have to do some math. Again, I have all the figures in here. I'm just going to start working through this. 1,000 I have, that should be 1250 and 300. If I add up those numbers, should get to 2550. Now remember, I can use my available minus my cost of goods sold to get my ending inventory. So I could subtract this and it should equal this, which is 1300. I can go back and kind of double check my math, especially the first couple times. Make sure I'm right. 600, and that should equal 1300. But again, in your homework, to save you some time, you might want to kind of find those values. It'll help, and then you can always double check if you get it wrong or something else. All right, let's move on to LIFO. Again, we're using this periodic method, so we're listing everything we have available first. We're not looking at this until the end of the month. I'm going to go ahead again, just record everything I have. Make sure I get those units in there. Everything is accounted for. And the value isn't going to change. I've already figured that out. That doesn't change between your methods. I know, because I've already done this up here, that my units that are sold should be 550. My ending inventory should be 250. Last in, first out means whatever I have at the bottom is going to be what I sell first. And I'm just going to add up until I get to that 550 figure. So I'm buying everything in here, or selling, I should say. I have nothing left in my ending inventory. I'm going to then sell everything I have from 315. And then I'm only at 500. I still need 50 more. So that's going to get sold. So what I have left in my ending inventory, purchases minus cost of goods sold equals ending inventory. I should have 250 left just from that beginning inventory. Now I'm going to check my values in my units, make sure those agree, and then I can go ahead and calculate the value that I will assign to it. And again, you can do one of them if you want. This one's easy because it's 250 times 4, so that's 1,000. So if I wanted to, I could just know that this should be 2850. It does equal that. I've done the math to make sure. But again, you can see how that can save you some time. All right, let's look at then FIFO. First in, first out. Same thing. I want just to keep everything straight in my head. This is a simple problem. Once they get a little longer, you're going to want to make sure you have this all situated and set up in a way that you can follow. My units equal 800. Again, I know my units aren't changing. I'm going to fill those in right away so that I can go back out and say, okay, now it's first in, first out. This is applying to how things are being sold. So I'm going to take everything from my beginning inventory, and I need 250 more to equal that 550. So I have 100 left. And then I sold nothing from here. I have all that left. Again, check those units. They will equal. And then we're going to go ahead and figure out a value. This value is not changing because those numbers don't change. That's an 8. So if I figure out one of these, I can kind of figure out the other one. Here they're about the same to figure out, right? So I'm going to do this one. That's 500. This would be 900. So that's 1400. So this number here should be 2450. You can check the math if you don't. Trust me. One last one. This one I'm going to give you a little bit of shortcut. Again, you can record everything if you want to. But here I'm going to start with the values. We're going to start here with the value. We know we have 3850. We know that because we've done all these problems. The equation that goes with this, let's go grab that. Shrink that there. All right, so we know we have our total value, which is 3850. We're going to divide that by our total units, which are 800. We know that. To give us an average cost, we divide, we get $4.81. So now we know that we're going to go to our units that we had before, 800, 550, and 250. And we're going to multiply by our average cost per unit. So that 550 times 481 is equal to 2645. About. And then my cost, or my ending inventory, I have 250 units. And that's going to equal around, this is a little bit of rounding issues to it, because these numbers should equal this number. We're off by a little bit, and that's again due to rounding. Don't worry about that. Everything's not going to be exactly perfect, and that's okay. But you can see here now how simple that was. First, we're going to go ahead and get that average cost, and then you're going to multiply out to find those different values based on the number of units we have. One other thing that we're going to talk about in a second, but I want to explain while we're here, is how this affects both our cost of goods sold and our ending inventory. In LIFO, our last in, first out, you can see our cost of goods sold is really high, right? And in FIFO, first in, first out, this is again only because our costs are rising normally. So our cost of goods sold is low because we're taking the lowest purchases first. That means when you have the average cost, this should fall somewhere in the middle. So that's something that you want to check out. Make sure you did it right. Your LIFO, again, as long as those costs are rising, should be the highest cost of goods sold. Your FIFO should be lowest. and the average should fall in between. Specific identification doesn't follow any of that because, again, it's based on what was actually sold. So I want you to go through, try to do this one on your own, and then come back and get some check figures from me. So I'll get you started on it because, again, we want to make sure we know the first thing is your goods available. Subtract out your ending inventory to get that cost of goods sold. So let's find beginning inventory, and all of our purchases will tell us what's available for sale, which is 80 units. I can go through and count my ending inventory if I want, but it also tells me whoops. I can go through and count my cost of goods sold if I want, but it tells me my ending inventory is 30, which means my cost of goods sold should be 50 units. Again, something easy to always go back and check to make sure you have it all right before we start doing all the math involved. So I want to make sure you have the figures that go along with this. I would recommend printing these pages if you like using this method and just kind of keep going with it for all your homework. You can also use Excel, very helpful. One thing that I'm going to walk you through just the specific identification one, because we tend to get one area wrong in this everywhere. So I'm just going to give you a hint. If you have nothing in your ending inventory, then it's still in your cost of goods sold, right? If you sold everything, then your ending inventory would be 0. For example, in this problem, it tells me I have 5 units in my ending inventory. I have 5 units from 10.3, 5 units from 10.15, and 20 from the 10.26, which means my beginning inventory, which had 20 units in it, must be all completely sold because there's nothing in my ending inventory. Now let me go ahead and give you those check figures so you can try this on your own and make sure you know how to do it all. So my total value should be 275. My cost of goods sold for specific identification should be 140, and this should be 135. Under LIFO, again, your value doesn't change. 275, 205, and 70. Let's get the LIFO in there. 275. And finally, that average cost. Again, notice this is notice that this is getting high. You can't get there. We go. This LIFO is giving me that high cost of goods sold. This is giving me, FIFO is giving me the low. This is giving me the average. So again, try this. If you can't get it, then just send me a quick email. I'll help you through that. One thing we do want to note, because LIFO, last in, first out, again is giving me that high cost of goods sold. Because cost of goods sold is an expense, it's going to cause a low net income. The reverse is true for FIFO. That's giving me a low cost of goods sold and therefore a high net income. And the average cost will give you that average, right? So understand the income statement effects of this. Find this in your book. Understand, not only memorize, but understand the effects of cost of goods sold being an expense and having that impact on net income. Go through, make sure you understand the inventory errors and what's going to happen there. These are all just things you can copy. And the last concept we want to go through is a concept called net realizable value, or lower of cost or market, or net realizable value. What this is saying is that we can record that net realizable value on our books by looking at which one is lower, cost or net realizable value. This is a simple process, so don't overthink it. Sometimes when everything else is hard, we make everything hard. This is very simple. In this situation, you're just going to go through and pick the lowest number, add them together, and that's what your inventory should be valued at. Sometimes we do this by category. Sometimes we do it by product. In this example, we're going to go ahead and do it by product. So I go to headphones. 40 is my lower number. Chargers. 100 is my lower number. Phone cases. 30 is my lower number. I go ahead and add that up, and I say my inventory should be valued at 170. The 100 plus the 40 plus the 30. So don't make that harder than it needs to be. Really focus on those 4 inventory methods. Make sure you know how to do those. And if you have questions, please let me know.